The room did not erupt when Prince William revealed what he had done. It became completely still. Queen Camilla stopped moving. King Charles lowered his eyes, and Catherine realized that her husband had crossed a line no future monarch was expected to cross without warning. William had not merely adjusted a private family arrangement, he had rewritten the palace's emergency succession plans to place Catherine and their children beyond Camilla's influence forever. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William summoned Charles, Camilla, Catherine, Princess Anne, and 2 advisors to Windsor Castle under secrecy. No public engagement appeared on the royal schedule, and no explanation reached the household. The succession contingency plan, meaning the emergency structure deciding who protects the heirs and manages royal duties during illness, abdication, or sudden crisis, lay at the center of the meeting. The prince spoke without raising his voice. He had formally altered that plan. Catherine would hold protected authority over every decision involving Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. Camilla would have no independent influence over their future roles. Anne would become the family safeguard if William could not act. The words landed, but their meaning was brutal. Camilla gripped the arm of her chair. She did not interrupt. The queen consort understood that the arrangement removed her from the circle surrounding the next generation. Charles looked toward his son with pain he could not hide. The king had not been asked for permission before the change was completed. William met his father's stare and refused to soften the truth. He said, uncertain palace loyalties could no longer stand above the safety of his wife and children. Catherine remained silent, but her hands tightened. The future king placed a signed red folder on the table. She recognized his name. Beneath it stood another signature. Anne had already endorsed the plan. The Princess Royal watched Camilla carefully. She had not supported a family rebellion. She had acted because the old wording left too much power with whoever controlled the palace during an emergency. Her signature made the decision harder to dismiss and far more dangerous to challenge. Camilla asked whether the plan could be reversed. One advisor answered through a documented constitutional briefing that any challenge would force the dispute into the open. The queen turned toward Catherine as the meeting ended. "You knew," she said. Catherine did not answer. But before Camilla could confront the woman now protected from her reach, the palace had to face the deeper question. What exactly was William so determined to protect his family from? Behind every constitutional phrase stood a frightened husband, a recovering wife, 3 young heirs, and a king watching his family divide around him. William's decision appeared cold on paper, yet it had been born from deeply human fears. Catherine wanted stability. Charles wanted unity. Camilla wanted recognition. Anne wanted duty protected. None of them entered that room without history, and none of them could leave without losing something they believed belonged to them. Catherine followed William into a private sitting room after the meeting, carrying the silence with her. She told him she had never wanted him to choose between his father and his family. The prince answered that the palace had already forced that choice by failing to protect her clearly. His position as heir, the person expected to inherit the throne, had changed the way he saw every disagreement. What others called tension, he now saw as a possible danger to George's future reign and to the emotional safety of Charlotte and Louis. William reached for her hand, but Catherine did not immediately take it. Her recent vulnerability had made questions of guardianship painfully real. She could no longer trust that tradition would automatically keep her children close if illness, abdication, or crisis changed the family's balance overnight. The princess asked whether the new plan protected all 3 children equally. He nodded, but his expression told her there was more. Charles remained alone at the conference table after everyone left. The king lifted the red folder and reread the clause, limiting Camilla's authority. He understood why his son had acted, yet the decision still felt like a judgment against his marriage. The monarch slowly set the file down without speaking. Caught between the wife beside him now and the son who would carry the crown forward. Camilla entered her private apartment, with anger burning beneath her composure. She removed a bracelet with trembling hands and placed it down too sharply. The queen consort did not feel merely challenged. She felt publicly accepted, but privately rejected by the future king. William had left her title untouched while cutting her away from the next generation, and that humiliation hurt more than any open accusation. Anne found William before midnight and delivered the truth through a documented private account prepared for the family meeting. She said Charles had been warned months earlier that the old arrangements were dangerously vague. The king had delayed changing them because he feared embarrassing Camilla and reopening old wounds around her place in the monarchy. Catherine then learned what William had kept from her. He had added a separate clause protecting Charlotte and Louis from being used as ceremonial replacements, substitutes, or bargaining pieces during any crisis involving George. The revelation left her shaken. This was not only about authority. Someone had imagined a future in which her children could be moved like pieces on a royal board. Anne lowered her voice and revealed the final blow. William had not acted because of general mistrust. One specific incident had convinced him that the old plan could be manipulated. That incident had occurred behind closed doors, during a ceremony meant to celebrate unity, but it became the moment William stopped believing the palace would protect his children. 3 weeks before the succession plan changed, the royal family gathered for what should have been a harmless rehearsal. There were no cameras, no crowds, and no reason for fear. Yet one sentence spoken beside a ceremonial chair altered everything. William heard his daughter's name used in a discussion she was never meant to enter, watched Catherine's expression collapse, and understood that private palace planning had begun treating his children as positions rather than people. From that moment, compromise was over. George stood beside William as officials explained his symbolic place in a future state ceremony. A state ceremony is a formal royal event used to display continuity, authority, and national order. Charlotte and Louis were expected to remain with Catherine, away from the central role. Camilla had already pushed for greater involvement in preparing the younger royals, insisting that her experience as queen gave her a voice in succession planning. An aide then raised a hypothetical emergency. George might be unavailable. The room tightened. Camilla answered that Charlotte could be separated from Catherine and prepared to stand beside the sovereign until the heir's position became stable again. Catherine reacted at once. She said her daughter would not be moved, briefed, or displayed without her consent. The princess did not shout, but the force in her voice stopped the rehearsal. Camilla replied that royal children could not always be treated as private children. The queen consort meant duty. Catherine heard danger. William stepped between them and asked a direct question. Did a plan already exist involving Charlotte? Camilla avoided the answer. She spoke about responsibility, continuity, and the needs of the crown, but she never said no. The prince watched her carefully, and concern hardened into suspicion. That evening, William obtained the rehearsal notes through a documented palace briefing, prepared for senior family members. One line changed everything. It authorized senior royal direction over George, Charlotte, and Louis during a national emergency. The phrase meant that the sovereign's household could temporarily control the children's movements and duties. Catherine's name appeared nowhere. Anne read the wording in a private recorded conversation with William and confirmed his fear. The reigning household could use that clause to overrule Catherine until the crisis passed. The Princess Royal warned him that vague language becomes most dangerous when trust has already broken down. Catherine sat beside him as he closed the file. William pressed his wedding ring against the cover and spoke with cold certainty. No one separates you from them. Not while I can still change this. The prince began drafting the revised succession plan in secret that same night. Yet secrecy inside a palace never lasts forever. Camilla discovered that Anne had been consulted and realized her authority was being challenged before the final signature was secured. When Camilla finally confronted William, she did not arrive as a frightened stepmother. She arrived as a queen, demanding to know why the future king was stripping away her authority. There were no advisors in the room when Camilla confronted William. No legal language, no ceremonial smiles, only a locked door, a shaken queen, and a future king who had already decided he would not retreat. She accused him of destroying Charles's household from within. William accused her of crossing a boundary around Catherine and the children. Then one sentence transformed the argument from a royal disagreement into a family rupture. Camilla had demanded the meeting moments after learning that Anne had reviewed a confidential succession draft. A succession draft is a private plan setting out how royal authority and family protection would operate during a crisis. William agreed to speak, but he refused staff, advisors, and even Charles. The prince remained standing inside the small Windsor room, making it clear that this was not a negotiation. "You have shut me out of the future," Camilla said. Her voice was controlled, but the pain beneath it was obvious. William answered that she had removed herself when she supported plans that treated Catherine's children as palace assets. The queen consort insisted the rehearsal discussion had been about duty, not control. He asked why Catherine's consent had been missing from the emergency wording. Camilla pushed her chair back and rose. Anger replaced restraint. She reached toward the red folder between them, but William placed one hand firmly across it. The future king would not let her touch the document. The gesture carried a brutal message. Her access had ended. The queen then delivered the revelation through a recorded private conversation, later preserved in the palace account. Charles had known about the original emergency clause. The king had seen the wording and had not objected. William went silent for one sharp moment. The conflict no longer belonged only to Camilla's household. It reached directly to his father. William admitted his own secret. He had deliberately kept the final draft from Charles until Anne's endorsement made it difficult to reverse. The prince knew his father might weaken the protections to spare Camilla humiliation. He had acted first, because emotional pressure had already delayed change once. Camilla's anger cracked. She asked whether William had ever truly considered her part of the family. For the first time, she sounded less like a queen defending power and more like a woman facing rejection. He did not soften his answer. "This is not about where you belong," William said. "It is about where my children are safe." Camilla stared at him, then turned toward the door. As she left, it opened before she could reach for the handle. Charles stood on the other side. The king had heard enough to understand that his son had challenged not only his wife, but his judgment. The confrontation was no longer between William and Camilla. It now belonged to a father and son, each convinced that protecting the monarchy required the other to surrender. Charles still wore the authority of the crown, but William carried the future it was designed to protect. When father and son finally sat opposite each other, neither raised his voice. That made the meeting more dangerous. The king could demand obedience. The heir could refuse. Between them rested a succession plan, a wounded queen, and the unspoken knowledge that any public fracture could weaken the institution both men had spent their lives preparing to serve. Charles controlled royal appointments, household duties, and family protocol through his position as sovereign. The crown, in plain terms, meant the authority attached to the reigning monarch, rather than the person alone. William could not match that power yet, but he held direct authority over Catherine and the children as a husband and father. He also carried the growing weight of the undisputed heir. The king asked why his son had not trusted him enough to speak first. William answered that every delay had left Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis exposed to wording no one could clearly defend. The prince said the revised plan had been built to work beside constitutional procedure, not against it. Its purpose was protection, not rebellion. Charles defended Camilla. He insisted she had been preparing the monarchy for an emergency, not trying to seize control. William did not move. Preparation without parental consent, he said, became control. The words landed harder, because the future king delivered them without anger. The monarch removed his glasses and pressed his fingers against his eyes. For one moment, he was not a sovereign facing defiance. He was a father, realizing that his son believed he had failed him. William watched him struggle, but did not withdraw the accusation. Anne entered only after Charles summoned her. She confirmed through a documented private briefing that she had endorsed the revisions because the old arrangement gave too much interpretive power to whichever household controlled access during a crisis. The Princess Royal warned that unclear authority could be used against Catherine before anyone had time to stop it. Anne then revealed the clause that changed the balance completely. If William and Catherine were both unable to act, she, not Camilla, would become the neutral protector of the Wales children. The role meant safeguarding their welfare and preventing another royal household from directing them for its own advantage. Charles reached for the pen beside the red folder. William believed he was about to strike out the clause. Anne believed the same. The king held it above the page, looked toward his sister, then placed it down without making a mark. The monarch refused to cancel the plan. Yet he also refused to approve it publicly. That silence created a vacuum inside the palace. Staff began reading every gesture as a sign of loyalty, and rival households quietly started choosing sides. By the following morning, doors were closing, schedules were changing, and Camilla was discovering that William's decision had already altered far more than a document. The first consequences arrived without an announcement. A briefing vanished from Camilla's schedule. An advisor was reassigned. Catherine received a security file she had previously been denied. Nothing looked dramatic outside the palace, yet everyone within it understood what was happening. William's succession changes had begun reshaping the balance of power. Camilla had not lost her title, but she could feel doors closing around her, and each closing door carried the future king's authority. Palace staff received strict instructions to send every plan involving George, Charlotte, or Louis directly to William and Catherine. No secondary household could approve appearances, private briefings, or ceremonial preparation for the children. A royal household meant the staff and advisors serving one senior member of the family. The order mattered because control over information often became control over decisions. Anne received temporary oversight of emergency coordination, involving the Wales family. The Princess Royal now had authority to check any crisis plan before it reached the children. Her appointment confirmed that William's revisions were no longer being treated as a private protest. They had become active palace policy. Camilla discovered the change when a briefing about George's future duties disappeared from her red box. The red box was the secure case used to carry official papers to senior royals. She asked an aide whether the omission had been accidental. He lowered his eyes and said nothing. The queen consort understood the answer. Charles entered later and tried to comfort her. The king said the situation might settle once emotions cooled, but he could not promise that her authority would return. Camilla accused him of hiding behind silence, while William made her irrelevant. He denied abandoning her, yet the monarch had no words strong enough to undo what had already happened. Camilla remained beside the unopened briefing case after Charles left. She reached toward it, then stopped. The queen withdrew her hand as though touching the case would confirm the truth. The future was still arriving, but it no longer required her approval. Catherine received the original rehearsal papers that afternoon. 2 additional notes proposed moving Charlotte and Louis into separate royal residences during an emergency. The princess read them twice before looking toward William. Her children had not merely been assigned duties. Someone had prepared to divide them. William ordered the notes removed from all active planning. He directed that they be preserved only inside a sealed archive, meaning a restricted record kept as permanent evidence. The prince wanted future officials to understand exactly why the protections had become necessary. Catherine began to cry, not from fear, but relief. She told William that the palace had finally recognized her as the children's mother, before treating her as a royal wife. He held her hand, but neither felt victory. That evening, Charles asked Catherine to meet him alone. William was not invited. Camilla was not informed. The crisis had been fought through advisors and documents, but its turning point would come through something far more dangerous: an honest conversation between Charles and Catherine. Catherine entered the king's private room without William beside her. Charles had asked for honesty, and she understood the cost of giving it. She could protect the peace by softening what had happened, or protect her children by speaking without fear. When the door closed, there were no advisors, no queen, and no heir to intervene. Only a father-in-law and daughter-in-law, confronting the painful truth that family loyalty had nearly become more important than a mother's right to her children. Charles asked whether Catherine had personally demanded the succession changes, or whether William had acted in anger after the rehearsal. A succession clause was a written rule explaining who would hold authority during a royal emergency. The princess answered carefully. She had not written the clauses, but she had supported them after seeing how quickly her place as a mother could disappear beneath palace procedure. Catherine told the king that she had spent years respecting his marriage, his position, and the woman beside him. She had accepted silence when speaking might have caused division. Yet she could not accept any arrangement allowing another household to separate her from George, Charlotte, or Louis. The princess said the children were heirs, but they were also her children first. Charles admitted the truth he had avoided. Camilla already felt uncertain about her place in the future monarchy, and he had feared that changing the old wording would deepen that insecurity. The king had chosen delay because he believed delay would preserve peace. Catherine did not retreat. She told him that protecting one woman's position could not require weakening another mother's rights. Her voice remained calm, but the words cut through every excuse. The princess had not entered the room to attack Camilla. She had entered to defend the boundary that should never have been questioned. Charles walked away, then turned back with tears in his eyes. The monarch looked older in that moment, burdened by the damage his silence had allowed. Catherine remained seated with her hands clasped, refusing to withdraw a single word. The king then revealed through a documented private conversation that he had never read the two notes proposing separate residences for Charlotte and Louis. Members of his household had expanded the emergency plan beyond what he had approved. Charles finally understood that William had not imagined the danger. Charles told Catherine that the new protections would remain. More importantly, he promised to issue written approval, so no one could describe William's decision as rebellion against the crown. Catherine's composure broke. The king took her hand and said the monarchy could not demand loyalty from children while making their mother feel powerless. For the first time, she believed the fight was ending. But the secret was already moving beyond Windsor. By sunrise, one newspaper image would turn a private family reckoning into a national verdict. The palace had hoped to release one carefully measured sentence. Instead, Britain woke to a front page that changed the meaning of the entire crisis. William was not shown as a rebellious son or an impatient heir. He was shown walking beside Catherine while holding Charlotte's hand. Above them stood 5 words that captured the public mood. He chose his family first. In that instant, Camilla's private defeat became a national conversation about protection, power, and motherhood. Buckingham Palace confirmed that Charles had approved updated family continuity arrangements concerning William, Catherine, and their children. Family continuity arrangements meant the emergency rules protecting royal duties and parental authority during a crisis. The statement avoided Camilla's name, but it did not deny that her role had been reduced. That silence made the message even stronger. Broadcasters called the decision the most serious internal change affecting the next generation since William became heir. The prince was praised for drawing a firm boundary around George, Charlotte, and Louis. Catherine became the emotional center of the story because the new rules protected her authority as a mother, not merely her position as a future queen. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace soon after the morning broadcasts. One mother raised a handwritten sign reading, "A princess is still a mother." People applauded when Catherine's name was mentioned, and the reaction spread quickly. The public no longer saw the dispute as a cold battle over palace procedure. They saw a family fighting over who had the right to control 3 children. A national newspaper placed William, Catherine, and Charlotte across its front page beneath the headline, "He chose his family first." The image changed everything. The future king looked protective rather than rebellious. The princess appeared supported rather than isolated. Their daughter became the human symbol of why the decision mattered. Critics still attacked William. They argued that he had humiliated Camilla and exposed deep divisions during Charles's reign. Supporters answered that the queen consort had crossed a line by accepting plans that could weaken Catherine's control. The debate became fierce because both sides understood the same truth. This was no longer private. Camilla watched the coverage alone. A broadcaster described Anne as the trusted guardian of the next generation. The queen switched off the television before the segment ended. She had kept her title, but the country now understood that the future would be protected without her. The palace then released a second detail. Catherine's authority over George, Charlotte, and Louis could not be overridden by another royal household during an emergency. Hours later, Charles appeared publicly beside William. Their brief handshake confirmed the king's acceptance and ended any hope of reversing the decision. The public had delivered its judgment, but the final verdict would be revealed in the people who gained security, the woman who lost influence, and the monarch who finally chose acceptance. William's decision did not end the monarchy, weaken the succession, or destroy the crown. It forced the institution to remember what it was meant to protect. Catherine was no longer an accessory to the future king's plans. George, Charlotte, and Louis were no longer names that could be moved through emergency files without their parents. Charles had accepted a painful correction. Anne had secured the boundary. And Camilla, frozen at the moment of revelation, understood that the future would no longer bend around her position. Charles gathered William, Catherine, Anne, and Camilla for the final signing. The approval document, the formal written order confirming how the family would operate during a crisis, rested open before them. The king signed first. His decision protected Catherine's parental authority and confirmed that every choice involving the children would remain within the Wales household. Anne signed next. Her role as emergency family protector was now permanent, meaning no competing royal household could claim temporary control over George, Charlotte, or Louis. The Princess Royal had stood beside the family before the outcome was certain, and now her loyalty had become part of the monarchy's new structure. William looked toward his father and apologized for acting without warning. The prince did not apologize for acting at all. Charles understood the difference. The monarch told his son that leadership sometimes begins where obedience ends. The words did not erase the pain between them, but they prevented that pain from becoming a permanent fracture. Catherine turned toward Anne and thanked her for protecting the children when the palace had still been divided. She answered that duty meant defending the vulnerable, even when the danger came from tradition rather than open hostility. The princess knew that loyalty to the crown meant nothing if the people beneath it were left exposed. Camilla approached Catherine after the final signature. The queen consort did not demand her authority back. She did not argue, threaten, or plead. She simply said that she now understood the boundary. "Then let it remain," Catherine replied. The exchange carried no warmth, but it ended the conflict with absolute clarity. Camilla would keep her title and her place beside Charles, yet she would never again hold independent influence over succession planning involving the Wales children. William had proven what his future reign would value. His wife and children would come before palace convenience, private sensitivities, or vague inherited rules. Charles had protected the crown by admitting that the old arrangements had failed Catherine. Anne had protected the family by refusing silence. The monarchy emerged changed, but intact. Catherine and the children were secure. William's authority was established. Anne's loyalty was honored. Charles accepted the future. Camilla accepted a limit she could never challenge again. The red folder was closed. The signatures were complete, and the argument was over. On that day, the crown did not survive by defending tradition at any cost. It survived because William forced it to choose protection, and Charles finally agreed. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.